So friends, Special Counsel Jack Smith has filed a pretty extraordinary motion with the U.S. Supreme Court asking the court to take up and resolve the issue right now as to whether a president of the United States who commits all kinds of crimes while in office enjoys absolute immunity from being prosecuted for his crimes. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, Special Counsel Jack Smith filed a motion with the Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to promptly, indeed immediately, take up and decide the issue of whether Donald Trump is absolutely immune from being prosecuted for the crimes he committed while he was president. Jack Smith wants the Supreme Court to take up the issue of whether Donald Trump is above the law. Jack Smith wants the Supreme Court to take up the issue of whether Donald Trump is, in a very real sense, a king. Let's start with the new reporting. This from the Washington Post. Headline, Supreme Court will consider fast-tracking Trump appeal in D.C. case. And that article begins, the Supreme Court said Monday it will consider Special Counsel Jack Smith's request to fast-track consideration of Donald Trump's claim he is immune from prosecution for alleged election obstruction in 2020, intensifying the legal jockeying over whether Trump's criminal trial in D.C. will stay on schedule for early next year. The decision by the nation's highest court doesn't mean that the justices will definitely short-circuit the typical appeals process, but it means they're going to hear arguments from both sides about whether they should act quickly. Trump's lawyers were told to file briefs on the issue by December 20th. The quick response by the Supreme Court came hours after Smith's office filed its request seeking to essentially leapfrog an appeals court process that Trump has already started, but which could take months to resolve. A lengthy appeal could slow the Justice Department's push for a March trial for Trump. This quote from Jack Smith's court filing, it is of imperative public importance that respondents, that is Donald Trump's, respondents' claims of immunity be resolved by this court, and that respondent's trial proceed as promptly as possible if his claim of immunity is rejected. And let me add here, friends, if his claim of immunity is granted by the Supreme Court, the case gets dismissed immediately. Done. The article continues. Smith argued that Trump's legal claims of immunity are profoundly mistaken, as the district court held, but only this court, the Supreme Court, can definitively resolve them. In his petition to the court, Smith acknowledged the question of criminal liability for a president is one the justices have not confronted, but a cornerstone of our constitutional order is that no person is above the law, Smith wrote. The force of that principle is at its zenith where, as here, a grand jury has accused a former president of committing federal crimes to subvert the peaceful transfer of power to his lawfully elected successor. Okay, friends, we're going to talk about this from the legal perspective. We're going to talk about this from the common sense perspective. And let me tell you, as a career criminal litigator, a career prosecutor, sometimes the legal and the common sense meet. Sometimes they even mesh, but often they're miles apart. They never touch. But we're going to talk about the legal support or lack thereof for this claim of absolute immunity for presidents. We're going to talk about the common sense approach to this question. But first, I want to have a look at something that is completely divorced from common sense, and that is the claim that Donald Trump and his attorneys are making right now in this regard. They have already weighed in. They've issued press releases or given media interviews, and they've said, no. We don't want to leapfrog the appeals court. We want this process to go as slowly as possible, right? They want to put this thing on a slow train to a possible dictatorship if Donald Trump wins in 2024. They want to slow the whole process down. Now, out of the other side of their mouths, they are claiming, and they have put in their court filings, Donald Trump is absolutely immune from being prosecuted for his crimes while in office, and that is the way the Supreme Court must rule. Can we look at those two claims? If Donald Trump and his lawyers really believed their own BS that they put in those legal court filings, that somehow the law supports this notion that a president can't be prosecuted for crimes while in office, Donald Trump's lawyers would say, we want the Supreme Court to take this up yesterday. Let's not wait. Let's get right to it. Because, as we've stated in our court filings, the Supreme Court must rule that a president is absolutely immune from prosecution. If the Supreme Court were to agree with that position, you know what would happen? Donald Trump's criminal case would be dismissed right now. And he could just get back onto the campaign trail, or maybe get back into the other courtrooms where he is either being civilly sued or prosecuted, but still, this case would go away. It would be dismissed if the Supreme Court agreed with Trump and his lawyers that he's absolutely immune from prosecution. So they really can't believe that, because if they did, they wouldn't want this decision to be put on that slow train. Okay, friends, let's talk about the legal and the common sense, the legal aspects and implications of a Supreme Court ruling that a president is above the law, can't be prosecuted for crimes he commits while in office, and then we'll finish up with the common sense aspects and implications in the event the Supreme Court were actually decide that a president is, in essence, king, untouchable. First, the legal. There are generally three sources of law. One, statutes, right? Federal laws that are on the books. There is no statute, there is no federal law that says a president has immunity from prosecution. Two, there's what we call case law, legal precedent. When an appellate court decides an issue, it becomes legal precedent for the courts that are in that jurisdiction. There is no case law, there is no legal precedent, there is no appellate opinion that has ever ruled that a president has absolute immunity from prosecution. And then three, the Constitution. That can be a source of law. There is no constitutional provision that says or even implies that a president can't be prosecuted. Zero law. No support in the law for Donald Trump's contention that he can't be prosecuted. Okay, let's turn to and finish up with common sense. Think about this. If the Supreme Court were to rule that a sitting president can commit any and all crimes and can't be touched, can't be charged, can't be prosecuted, can't be convicted, he has free rein to commit crimes while in office, that would put the Supreme Court out of business, because they would no longer be a co-equal branch of government. They would be a second-class branch of government, because a president could, for example, order that Supreme Court justices he doesn't like or whose opinions he disagrees with, order them summarily rounded up and imprisoned, or worse. And because he's president, they let you do it. Indeed, the Supreme Court lets you do it if they rule that a president can't be prosecuted for his crimes. The Supreme Court, especially a certain block of justices, love their supreme status. Indeed, they enjoy being not only above the chief executive, above the president. They are the last stop to decide whether a president's conduct is lawful or not, is constitutional or not. And believe me, they covet that supreme status. The last thing they're going to do is give it up and turn it over to a criminal president. Not going to happen. Second, if they do, if the Supreme Court says every president can commit all the crimes they want while in office and they're untouchable, well, guess what? Joe Biden's in office. If the Supreme Court ruled the way Donald Trump is urging the Supreme Court to rule, Joe Biden would be given a green light, would be given permission by the Supreme Court to commit all the crimes he wants, to retain the power of the presidency, just like Donald Trump tried to do when he committed crimes on and around January 6th. Donald Trump failed. Joe Biden could take the lessons of that failure and perhaps succeed. He could commit all the crimes he wants. He could retain the power of the presidency, and nobody could touch him. Because the Supreme Court has said you can't touch a president if a president commits crimes. That is another reason. Common sense dictates that the Supreme Court will not rule that a president is a king, a president is above the law, a president can't be prosecuted for his crimes while in office. And I hope they rule promptly. I hope they expedite, and I hope we can then all turn our attention and our focus to the commencement of Donald Trump's criminal prosecution in Washington, D.C., beginning on March 4th. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.